I didn't grow up around tattoos. I didn't really know that many tattooed people. I remember the first tattoo, like, I distinctly remember thinking about was when my Uncle Brandon got out of prison. I had seen a tattoo on his shoulder, and I remember asking about it. It was a guy sitting on a park bench like this, you know, and I don't want to say any keywords on the internet here that might get it flagged, but the tattoo was crazy. And I just remember being like, what, why is he doing that? Funny enough, my friend Bo repainted that Flash. I didn't realize it was from Flash until I saw the repaint, and I was like, "Hey, is that from something?" And he actually sent me the original Flash it's from. So that's pretty cool. But at the time, I was like, "Oh, that's just crazy." Uncle Brandon's a little wacky. After that, I didn't really know too many people with tattoos. I mean, my mom had one, my dad had a few, and aside from that, I didn't really see too many tattoos until I got to high school. Went to a super serious high school. It was called Louisville Male Traditional High School. And as far as high schools go, it's as serious as you're going to get in a public school, or was at the time. And it was a very college prep type school. College was always in the cards. I always excelled at the standardized testing. I didn't really do so well at schoolwork and all that, but the testing itself was always super easy to me. Schoolwork itself, I was never super into. And the only classes I really enjoyed were my art classes. I remember skipping a lot of my classes to go hang out in Miss Delaney's class. She was a truly important figure to me growing up. She just passed away a couple years ago now, but she was one of the greatest women I ever knew. And she always encouraged me to be my best self, but also encouraged me to keep going with art. When I graduated high school, I didn't really know what I was going to do, but I knew I wanted to do something with art. I distinctly remember senior year, second period, I was in Mr. Overgaard's class. Another great teacher that was really supportive of me in a time when I needed it. And at that point in time, I was skipping class a lot. I would go to the bathroom, and there was a group of us from various different classes all around the school, and we would go hang out in the boys' bathroom on the second floor, and we would just sit in there and bullshit and spend a good 20, 30 minutes there every day and then go back to class before the bell rang. I remember one day my friend Michael Riley came in. He had this big tiger tattooed on his rib cage. I've been meaning to reach out to him to actually see it because I'm curious now, but at the time I was like, man, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. I hadn't really thought too much about tattoos. A little bit later, my friend Marcus got like a couple silverback gorillas tattooed on his arm, and Mark Mosa, that was his Twitter handle at the time, but also I guess his nickname as well. But it was really cool, and I just remember thinking like, wow, like you guys got tattoos. I just hadn't thought much about free will. I was living in my parents' house. I grew up in a really strict household. And like I said, college was always the thing that was in the cards. That was, you got to go to college. You got to go to college. My dad didn't go to college. He went back to college when I was in late elementary school or early middle school. I got to see him graduate with a degree in finance. His whole thing was he got started too late. And by the time he graduated, to get a good job, and that was like shortly after the financial crisis in '08, any sort of experience he could gain was going to have to be through free internships. And he had 3 kids at the time. He couldn't just go work for free. So he went back to landscaping. I turned 18 the day the seniors did their last walk through the hallways and said goodbye to everyone. And we got out of school a couple hours early. I think like 11:30 or something, we got out of school. And I specifically set up an appointment for my 18th birthday at noon at a tattoo shop right down the road from my house. I didn't really look into any of the tattoo shops. It was just the closest one. I called ahead maybe like a week before and set up an appointment through the phone. Didn't have an artist in mind. They set me up with a guy named Charlie. And Charlie had just graduated his apprenticeship at the time. He might have been a little ways out from that. I remember going in, and I was the worst client. Like, I brought 2 or 3 friends with me to hang out while I got my rib cage blasted. I was getting a memorial tattoo for a friend. It's covered up just because I didn't really like how, like, I didn't like the subject matter, as I grew as a tattooer. But at the time, I was like, whatever I get, I have to be able to explain to my mom and my dad. And I actually got that and some incorrect Blink 182 lyrics on my wrist. I was like the worst fucking client, for real. And I showed up, got this big tattoo on my rib cage that it took like hours. I got the lyrics on my wrist upside down, facing me. And God, I was the worst. And so while I'm sitting there getting tattooed by Charlie, being the worst client, my friends, of course, get bored. We're there for hours. And they end up fucking off at some point. And I'm just sitting there talking to Charlie about tattooing. It had never occurred to me that there was people who do the tattoos. Like, obviously, there's people who do tattoos. They don't just fucking appear. But it never crossed my mind. Like, it had always just been something that existed and never more thought into it than that, until I was actually sitting in there and I was like, wow, like there's all these people here that come here every day and do tattoos. Wow, that's crazy. Like this is just what you do. And Charlie was super cool. He was young at the time. He's like a few years older than me, right? So an instant I could look up to, right? Super chill. And I just started talking to him, and I was like, how did you get this job? Like, what did you have to do to be sitting here tattooing me right now? Like, how does that work? And he explained that he had gone to, I think it was like Carolina Gulf Coast University, got an engineering degree, and got into engineering and hated it. And so he quit his job or internship or whatever the fuck he was doing at the time. He quit it and he started apprenticing. And that was like the brief story he gave me as like an asshole 18-year-old that was asking the same question. He's probably been asked a million times. But he was cool about it. And honestly, that point about him going to engineering school really stuck with me. My mom calls me while I'm sitting on the table getting tattooed, and I answer the phone naturally, and I'm like, hey, what's up? And again, very strict household. My mom had to know where I was at all times, and she's like, you were supposed to be home early today, and she was going to make tacos for my birthday, I believe is what was going on. That was my favorite thing she would make. And I was like, well, I'm at the tattoo shop right now. I told Dad, and then just like said whatever I needed to say to get off the phone real quick. And that was true technically. I've never been like a great keeper of my own secrets, in the sense of, if I'm excited about something, I gotta tell everybody. I gotta tell, or at least tell somebody. I think it was the night before, I told my dad, I was like, hey, just a heads up, in case shit hits the fan tomorrow, I'm going to be getting tattooed. And I've got an appointment set up. I'll be down the street at this shop, and I'll be home after. And my mom was so upset that she was like, and she knew my friends were with me, and she was trying to be supportive, I think, but was upset. So she was like, look, let's go to the Mexican restaurant next to the house instead. I'll meet you there when you get done, blah, blah, blah. And she cried. My mom cried when she saw I got tattooed. Like I said, she had one little one that she got, and she had always regretted. I've actually covered it up since then. She always regretted it, and she really didn't like tattoos, and she always wanted the best for me. She really did. My mom, she actually adopted me, and that's a story for another time. But my dad's my biological father, and he met my mom when they were in like middle school. My adoptive mom, they dated a little bit in middle school and then like fell off for a while, and I think met again around the time I was like 3 years old. So she had been in my life pretty much since the beginning, as long as I remember, just about. She just always wanted the best for me. I kind of had come from a real bad situation, and at a certain point, her and my dad ended up with full custody of me. And so she was always just like, she was supportive, but we also butted heads a lot. Like we did not get along. And so a lot of me being 18, it kind of just started there, where I was like full blown rebellion. I was going to do everything that I knew she did not want me to do. And not really out of the sake of like spite or anything. I think it was really honestly more just stuff I wanted to do. I wanted to be my own person and not feel confined to a box. And she just wanted me to do well with life and be financially secure and grow up and have a family and nice things, and not have to fall back into the type of life that I'd come from. I think her constant focus on that put a lot of stress on me as a young person, But as an adult, it definitely like helped me navigate the world I'm in today with a different point of view, and in a way that really did set me up for success. And I think that's like a super important part of it. So anyways, we meet up, we go to this restaurant. My mom, she sees me. I don't think I mentioned that I got my wrist tattooed to her too. That was like a secondary thing. So at first she's like, "Let me see it," and I pull up my shirt, and she's just crying. She's like, "I can't believe you do this to yourself." And then my little brother, the bastard, dude. I love my little brother, but me and him we've always had a rivalry, just little brother, big brother shit. But he pointed out my wrist, and he was like, "He's got another one on his wrist." I was like, "Fuck, dude." And so she grabs my wrist, and she's just looking at it, crying, and my friends are losing their shit. They're like, "This is so funny." But fast forward, we go to the restaurant. My mom's freaking out, and she was upset. And I think this kind of started a whole spiral of things, of me just like making decisions in my life for me, but only thinking really about myself, in a way that I do think was like super important for me at the time, to be fair. But I put a lot of stress on my relationship with my parents. And within a week from then, I had made some other choices. My mom, she chose to be my mom, the woman who physically gave birth to me. She was a real piece of shit, for real. I had had really no contact with this side of the family from the time I was like in elementary school. But I had always been really close with this one uncle when I was a kid. He was a convicted felon also. That whole family was convicted felons. Both my uncles and my birth mother, they were all just, always into shit. But the one uncle had stayed clear for a long time. And it was actually my parents' friend put me in contact with my uncle. He was like, "Look, I know your uncle. He's been trying to get a hold of you for a long time, but I told him, you're 18. So now I'm going to give you his phone number. If you want to reach out to him, great. If not, you don't have to." He was just like, "I would be a bad friend if I didn't at least give you the option to get in contact with your uncle." And so, of course, I call him instantaneously. Like I said, I didn't have a great relationship with my parents at the time. Like, we butted heads hard. So when I saw that, like, oh, I could get a hold of this uncle that I had been thinking, like I was holding up on a pedestal for my whole life, and I was like, okay, I'm calling him immediately. And I think that was kind of the final straw in a lot of things. And my mom had done so much to keep that side of the family away from me, just out of the sake of like they were out doing bad shit a lot of the time. And when I told her that I went and met him, she gave me the ultimatum of, "You can stay here and you can live by our rules, but if you're going to welcome that side of the family back into your life, I'm not going to let you do that under our roof." And I was given the option. Like I said, I took the option to leave. And I spent that summer living with my uncle, and pretty much right up until when I went to college. And that whole time, I was super stoked about tattooing. I thought it was really cool. I kept getting more and more tattoos. So I was driving all the way to Louisville. I worked right across from the tattoo shop. So if I had a good shift, made some extra tips, I would go in, try to get tattooed. And then I was already enrolled in college. So I was like, I'm going to go to college. I don't really know what I want to do with my life, but I guess I'll probably try to be a teacher. I like art. I had a lot of teachers that meant a lot to me, helped me through a lot of hard shit when I was in high school. So it seemed like the logical thing to do. And I was enrolled, so I went through the process, moved in. I lived on campus and was right across the hall from my cousin, who's my best friend, and tried to do the college thing. I tried to go to my classes. I tried to keep up with the coursework, but I just wasn't interested. At the time, just thought I was having trouble sleeping. I've since been diagnosed with some stuff that kind of explains that. But at the time, it was just, I wasn't sleeping. And that was like a huge problem, for me keeping on top of stuff, because I would go days with just a couple hours of sleep, and then I wouldn't want to get out of bed or go to my 8 a.m.s. I wouldn't want to keep up with my coursework. I spent like the first few weeks of the semester like partying every chance I could, going out with my friends, getting into trouble. But it became evident pretty quick that I wasn't going to stay in college. There was nothing really there for me. And the whole time I was there, even like from week one, I remember talking to one of the guys there about like, oh, I'm going to be a tattoo artist. I want a tattoo. I want a tattoo. And what Charlie had told me just kept sticking with me that whole time. I was like, oh, I'll just get an art degree. I'll keep trying to work towards this teacher thing just in case, but I'm gonna learn to tattoo. And the more I talked about it, the more I was like, I'm doing this. And you know, dude, I didn't know shit about tattooing. I literally knew nothing. But I just was like, I'm gonna do it. You know, I just thought it was cool. I was drawn to it instantly. So when final week came around, I had already pretty much given up on everything at that point. I technically passed all my classes, barely. Like I think I had like a 1.2 or 1.4 GPA. Like I did not have a good GPA, but straight D's or something. I might have had a C or a B thrown in there somewhere. I skipped all my finals. I spent finals week like you get like a few days to prep beforehand, and you know, cram all your studying in. Me and my cousin Simon, we were sitting in the library, and I drew a picture of him while we were sitting there, while he was studying. I was sitting there drawing him. I drew a R2D2. I was like, okay, I'd done like a little research, but still at the time there wasn't a whole lot available on the internet of like how to get an apprenticeship, or maybe I was looking at the wrong stuff, I don't know. But this was like before Instagram really took off and everything, so there wasn't a whole lot of like resources or publicly available tattoo information on the internet, which probably for the best. But for me at the time, I was just winging it, and I didn't know any of the rules about trying to get an apprenticeship. I didn't know oh, you're supposed to go back and ask. They're going to tell you no. You just want to keep asking and, you know, go back, make yourself useful, clean around the shop until they let you in. I didn't know any of that. I just thought it was asking for a job. Really, I didn't realize how much went into tattooing. I didn't realize how serious a lot of it was. It was just something I thought was really cool and different. Like I didn't know anything. I knew literally nothing, and I sucked. Like I was the worst client. I was the worst. I was like just super annoying. I was 18. You know, nobody wants an 18-year-old hanging out at their shop all the time. You know, not one like me. I think I went to my first final. I went to the first one, and I'd already put stuff in motion for me to withdraw from school at the end of the semester, like drop out officially. I was going to have to move out of my apartment. I called my parents and talked to them about this a little bit. They knew I was struggling with college, but again, this was like another, and we had like reconciled, you know, a little bit. They understood why I would want to go meet my uncle. And once I met him and talked to him and was able to tell them about how he was doing better for himself and what he had going for him, you know, they were way more open to the fact that I had talked to him and had been living with him. And at the end of the semester, when I was like, hey, I'm dropping out, I'm going to go get an apprenticeship and try to learn how to tattoo. I don't remember the exact thing they said, but more or less they were like, if you're going to do that, don't come home. You know, we can't support you throwing everything away, you know, to them. Because at the time, like, and they also knew nothing about tattooing. So, like, to them, this really was me throwing my life away. And, you know, everybody in my life was saying, hey, like, you're throwing your life away. And I have one grandma I have several grandparents, and I'm pretty close with all of them. But I have one grandma that I've always been very, very close to, that from a very young age, and she's always been very supportive of everything I've done in life. And she was the one person in my life that always just wanted me to be happy. She didn't care about me going to college. She didn't care about me doing anything, getting a prestigious job or whatever. She just wanted me to be happy. And she actually really does not like tattoos. I think she's got my skin mapped out and memorized to the fact that she, better than probably most people other than like my wife, can point out a new tattoo anytime she sees me. She's like, you didn't have that one before. You know, she's so funny. But I called her and I was freaking out. I had nowhere to go. I was like, look, I'm about to be homeless. And she was like, no, you're not, come stay with me. The first place I went naturally was the shop that I was getting tattooed at the time. By then I had probably like 5 or 6 tattoos that I had gotten from the same shop. And I was like, that's the shop I know. They know me at least. I'll go in, I'll ask them for an apprenticeship. And I bring in my portfolio. And at the time, I should note, which if you're familiar with my tattoos at all, this will be a little funny. But I only wanted to do realism. My whole portfolio, all my art classes in high school, everything was realism. Everything was portraits mostly. Like I had some other stuff in there, but like portraits were my thing that I enjoyed doing at the time. And that was just like, that was what I wanted to do. And so I went to the shop I had been getting tattooed at and asked them for an apprenticeship. And they were just like, yeah, no, we aren't taking apprentices. To me at the time, like, that's a cut and dry answer. You're not taking apprentices. Well, can't work there, so I I just started looking up tattoo shops, and I made a list, wrote down all the different tattoo shops in town and their addresses. I went around to every single tattoo shop I could find, and I was like, I'm going to go to all of them until someone says yes. And that ended up not happening because the first shop that said yes was, to date, probably one of the sketchiest shops I've ever, like, actually been in. Like, I'd say, like, top 10, shops I've stepped foot in terms of sketchiness. And that dude, I believe his name was Snooky or something. And I hope he was diabetic because he was walking around. He had just had half his foot chopped off, he said. And he was hobbling around this shop with a bloody, like bandaged up foot. Like you could see the blood stains through the bandage, hobbling around on crutches. I was just polite and pretty reserved because I knew I was in uncomfortable territory for me, or like unfamiliar territory. I didn't know how to talk to tattooers, and all these dudes are like 20 years older than me. I was like, I'm just going to be as polite as possible at all these places. I should have fucking just dipped. But I sat and listened to him talk for hours probably. He looked through all my art. He's like, oh, this is really good stuff. Your portraits are really good. I'll take you on. What I do is you sign a contract and you have to work here for 10 years. And if you leave, you owe me $10,000, and you can't work within, I think it was like 200 miles the next 6 years after you leave. And there was all kinds of crazy stuff. And, like, dude was gross, first of all. So it wasn't my kind of place, So I was like, I'm not staying here. But I thanked him for his time, and I was like, let me think on it. And I was like, I walked out that door knowing I was never stepping foot in that fucking place again. And I kept going down the list, and I think I really only went to maybe 4 places. I stopped at Acme Tattoo at one point, and Acme is a fantastic shop, and honestly, like, that's the type of shop I should have gone for at the time, but I was young and I wanted to do portraits and stuff, and I didn't know there were different styles to tattooing. They were a very traditional shop, like actual like Sailor Jerry flash hanging in their shop, and they were like good traditional shop. I remember talking to the guy, and he was like, only had one apprentice, and he's apprenticed for like 5 years, and and he moved out to California. I'm pretty sure it's Derek Snodgrass, honestly, is who he was talking about in retrospect. And that dude's a fucking ripper, dude. That dude's tattoos are so sick. But at the time, I didn't know shit about tattooing. I didn't, he didn't have his portfolio there, so it's not like he was showing me like examples of his work or anything. He was just like, yeah, like he apprenticed for 5 years. First 3 years you don't touch a tattoo machine, and then if things go well after 3 years, you can start tattooing or whatever. And I might be getting some of the details of that like slightly wrong, but in my head I heard 5 years. And I was like, fuck, that's longer than college. I'm trying to get away from college. You're trying to put me right back in that shit. Like, he didn't offer me an apprenticeship either, obviously. So he was like, work on this, get a portfolio together, work on this. He honestly gave me way more of his time than he should have for how I was and who I was at the time. And of course, I didn't listen to shit. And I was like, all right, well, that was a dud. On to the next shop. And I ended up going to a place called Skin City Tattoos. And dude, it's tattoos with a Z. And it's owned by a dude named Mike Haney. Mike is one of the nicest dudes in the world. And it's a real traditional shop. Mike learned from Tattoo Charlie Wheeler in Louisville, Kentucky. And, he's just a biker dude that he owned his tattoo shop, the shop's still open today. And he's just a real great dude, but it was a real traditional shop. And I took in my portfolio, and he showed me, or had me show everybody at the shop. Everybody looked at it. I think he had me come back another day so that he could show more of the guys that weren't there and kind of talk to everybody and see what they thought. And he ended up having me come back in and showing everybody. And sure enough, he offered me an apprenticeship. It was a pretty straightforward deal. He was like, here's a contract. It's just saying that you're going to pay me for the apprenticeship. It was like a reasonable amount. It was like 2,000 or 3,000, something not super outrageous. And it was like, you're going to, work here, and if you quit, you don't get your money back. That was pretty much the gist of it. It wasn't like some of the outrageous contracts I've seen and honestly later signed. He gave me my first real shot, and I'll save all the apprenticeship stories for another video, but that's the story of how I left college to get an apprenticeship.